Lucky numbers, 10 numbers most likely to appear in March 2025. Hello everyone, and welcome to Zen Buddhism Wisdom, your sacred space for discovering the hidden truths of Buddhist teachings, spiritual prosperity, and the deep wisdom of the universe. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to attract success effortlessly while others struggle endlessly, despite their hard work and determination? Is it simply fate, or is there an unseen force guiding our paths? In Buddhist numerology, numbers are not just random digits, they carry profound energetic vibrations that influence our lives in ways we may not even realize. Unlike Western numerology, which focuses on personal characteristics, Buddhist numerology integrates spiritual alignment, karma, and the flow of cosmic energy. These sacred numbers act as keys, unlocking doors to prosperity, harmony, and spiritual awakening. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Certain numbers vibrate more powerfully at specific times. This means that in March 2025, some numbers will be especially potent, carrying energies that can shape your destiny in unexpected ways. What if I told you that by understanding these numbers, you could align yourself with greater opportunities, financial breakthroughs, and even deeper spiritual clarity? Would you be interested in uncovering this hidden wisdom? If so, stay with me, because today, we're diving into the 10 most powerful numbers for March 2025, and how they can help you attract luck, abundance, and spiritual growth according to ancient Buddhist teachings. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Zen Buddhism Wisdom so you never miss out on transformative insights like this. And if you're ready to welcome positivity into your life, type in the comments, "I align with the energy of abundance." Now, let's unlock the mysteries of Buddhist numerology. Throughout history, civilizations have revered numbers as sacred symbols of the universe's hidden patterns. But in Buddhism, numbers are more than just symbols, they hold a vibrational force capable of shaping our destiny. The concept of luck in Buddhist philosophy is not a matter of chance but an intricate dance of karma, energy, and numerical resonance. Buddhist numerology suggests that numbers act as spiritual codes, guiding us through the cycles of existence. The idea that numbers influence reality is not unique to Buddhism. Ancient cultures such as the Chinese, Indians, and even the Pythagoreans of Greece recognized that numbers govern everything from celestial movements to human consciousness. In Buddhist traditions, these numerical energies are seen as karmic blueprints, affecting our spiritual evolution, personal relationships, and even financial prosperity. Take, for instance, the significance of the number 8 in Buddhism. It is considered the number of infinity and balance, reflected in the Eightfold Path, the sacred guide to enlightenment taught by the Buddha himself. The number 7, often linked to divine wisdom, corresponds to the 7 factors of enlightenment, a crucial aspect of mental purification. The number 108, revered across Buddhist traditions, represents the 108 earthly desires that practitioners seek to transcend through meditation and mindfulness. Beyond religious texts, historical figures have demonstrated the power of numerical alignment. Emperor Ashoka, one of the greatest Buddhist rulers, is said to have inscribed 33 edicts across his empire, symbolizing his commitment to spreading the Dharma. In Japan, the Zen monk Dogen emphasized the importance of cycles of 9 in deep meditation, believing it to enhance inner wisdom. Even today, Buddhist temples across Asia ring their bells 108 times on New Year's Eve, symbolizing the cleansing of past karma and welcoming new spiritual opportunities. When we consciously work with numbers in our daily lives, whether by meditating on them, repeating them in mantras, or structuring our actions around their energies, we align ourselves with their profound influence. Numbers, far from being random, serve as the universe's silent whispers, guiding us toward abundance, harmony, and enlightenment. Now, let's explore the 10 numbers most likely to bring luck and prosperity in March 2025, based on Buddhist numerology. Number 9 is more than just a symbol of completion, it is the threshold between endings and profound spiritual rebirth. In Buddhist philosophy, the number 9 embodies wisdom accumulated over lifetimes, the karmic debts being settled, and the readiness to transcend old patterns. It represents the moment when a caterpillar dissolves completely before emerging as a butterfly, destruction leading to higher transformation. One of the most legendary figures in Buddhist history, Bodhidharma, the founder of Zen Buddhism, is said to have meditated in a cave for 9 years facing a blank wall. His unwavering dedication symbolizes the endurance required to reach enlightenment. According to legend, when he finally rose from his meditation, he had transcended the illusions of the material world and spread the essence of Zen to China, forever changing the course of Buddhist history. His journey perfectly illustrates number 9's energy, separation from the old self, deep contemplation, and ultimate awakening. Across Buddhist cultures, number 9 appears in sacred teachings, the 9 stages of mental cultivation guide practitioners from basic mindfulness to ultimate enlightenment. The 9 levels of consciousness in Yogacara Buddhism describe layers of the mind, from surface-level thoughts to the deepest karmic imprints. In Thailand, Buddhist temples often feature 9 spires, symbolizing spiritual ascent. Even Thai kings traditionally take the throne under the energy of number 9. King Rama IX, revered as a great leader, embodied wisdom, compassion, and transformation. Number 9 calls for release, transition, and trust in universal wisdom. If this number frequently appears in your life, it may be a cosmic signal urging you to evolve beyond your current limitations. Declutter your life, let go of emotional baggage, outdated beliefs, and attachments that no longer serve you. Deepen your spiritual practice, commit to self-reflection, meditation, and acts of compassion to cultivate inner wisdom. Embrace change fearlessly, just as Bodhidharma embraced solitude for enlightenment. Use this period to step into your higher purpose. In 2024, March, the 3rd month, holds immense transformative power, making it the perfect time to close old chapters and prepare for a spiritual rebirth. If you keep encountering the number 9, the universe is whispering, you are ready for your next great awakening. Number 17 is often seen as a bridge between the material and spiritual worlds, a number that blends bold action with deep inner knowing. In Buddhist numerology, it holds a unique vibration. 1 represents the ability to carve new paths, while 7 is the number of deep wisdom, intuition, and divine connection. Together, they create a powerful energy that attracts sudden breakthroughs, unexpected financial gains, and moments of life-altering insight. One of the most fascinating historical examples of the number 17's energy can be seen in the life of the renowned Buddhist scholar Xuanzang. In the 7th century, Xuanzang defied imperial orders and embarked on a daring 17-year pilgrimage to India. Determined to uncover the true teachings of the Buddha. Guided by dreams, visions, and an unshakable intuition, he navigated treacherous deserts, bandit-infested territories, and political conflicts. Against all odds, he returned to China with over 600 scriptures, translating them into Chinese and transforming Buddhism forever. His journey embodies the essence of number 17, an intuitive leap of faith that leads to extraordinary rewards. Beyond historical figures, number 17 plays a significant role in Buddhist teachings. There are 17 stages of consciousness in Abhidhamma philosophy, guiding the mind from ordinary perception to ultimate enlightenment. In Tibetan Buddhism, the 17th Karmapa holds a sacred role in preserving and spreading the Dharma. A living testament to the number's spiritual power. Even in modern times, many Buddhist temples are designed with 17 steps leading to their main sanctuaries, symbolizing the path of ascension through wisdom and faith. If the number 17 keeps appearing in your life, it may be a cosmic nudge urging you to trust your inner voice. The universe often speaks in whispers, through dreams, synchronicities, and sudden flashes of insight. Pay close attention to these signs, as they might reveal opportunities hidden in plain sight. Financially, this is a number associated with unexpected windfalls, but only for those willing to take inspired action. Whether it's a business idea, an investment, or a career shift, this number encourages you to step forward with confidence. March 2025, the third month, amplifies 17's energy, making it a time for bold decisions and spiritual clarity. If you keep encountering this number, the message is clear: trust your intuition, embrace change, and prepare for an unexpected blessing. Number 21 carries the powerful vibration of manifestation, uniting the bold drive of number 1 with the harmonious, cooperative energy of number 2. In Buddhist numerology, this number represents a perfect equilibrium between personal ambition and collective harmony, making it an extraordinary force for those seeking to manifest success, abundance, and meaningful relationships. One of the most striking examples of the number 21's power in Buddhist history is the transformation of Emperor Ashoka. Before embracing Buddhism, Ashoka was a ruthless conqueror, responsible for immense bloodshed during the Kalinga War. However, historical accounts suggest that after the war, he experienced a profound spiritual awakening, one that was preceded by a vision of 21 sacred symbols. These symbols, interpreted as divine guidance, led him to renounce violence and dedicate his life to spreading Buddhist teachings. Under his rule, Buddhism flourished across Asia, and his legacy as the righteous king remains one of the most inspiring tales of transformation in history. Beyond Ashoka's story, the number 21 appears in many aspects of Buddhist thought. There are 21 forms of the Buddhist deity Tara, each embodying a different aspect of compassion and protection. In some traditions, monks and practitioners chant sacred mantras in cycles of 21 to magnify their spiritual intentions. Even in temple architecture, you will often find 21 steps leading to a shrine, symbolizing the ascent from worldly desires to enlightenment. For those looking to harness the power of 21 in March 2025, the key lies in finding harmony between self-reliance and collaboration. If you desire financial success, this number encourages you to take initiative while also forging strong alliances. If you seek love or friendship, it reminds you that true connections are built on mutual respect and shared goals. The balance between independence and partnership is what makes 21 such a potent number for manifestation. To activate its energy in your life, consider writing the number 21 on a piece of paper and placing it in your wallet. It serves as a symbolic anchor for abundance. During meditation, focus on aligning your personal ambitions with the greater good. And if you find yourself encountering this number repeatedly, take it as a sign: the universe is aligning to bring your desires into reality, but only if you balance ambition with wisdom and action with trust. Number 33 is often regarded as a sacred master number, representing the highest levels of compassion, healing, and spiritual service. In Buddhist numerology, this number is deeply connected to selfless love and enlightenment, making it a powerful force for those who seek to uplift others and transform their own spiritual journey. Unlike ordinary numbers, 33 carries a vibration that transcends the material world, guiding individuals toward profound acts of kindness and healing. One of the most striking historical examples of this number's influence can be found in the story of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of infinite compassion. In some Buddhist traditions, it is said that Avalokiteshvara made a sacred vow to relieve all beings from suffering. However, upon witnessing the vast pain in the world, his head shattered into 33 pieces. Instead of succumbing to despair, he was miraculously reborn with 33 different faces, each one symbolizing a unique form of divine compassion to help guide humanity. This story serves as a reminder that true strength comes not from power but from boundless love and the willingness to serve others. Beyond mythology, the power of 33 is reflected in real-world Buddhist practices. Tibetan monks often chant mantras 33 times as an offering of healing energy. Some ancient Buddhist temples are structured with 33 steps leading to the inner sanctum, symbolizing the spiritual ascent toward enlightenment. Even in modern Buddhist teachings, the concept of metta, loving-kindness, meditation is often practiced in cycles of 33 to amplify its impact, sending waves of positive energy across the universe. In March 2025, the energy of 33 will be especially strong, acting as a spiritual beacon for those willing to embrace selfless acts of love. If you find yourself drawn to this number, consider it a sign that the universe is calling you to extend kindness, not just to others, but also to yourself. Healing begins with understanding, and true enlightenment is achieved through the compassion we cultivate in everyday life. To harness the power of 33, start by practicing small but meaningful acts of kindness, whether it's offering a sincere compliment, forgiving someone from the past, or simply being present for a loved one in need. If you are struggling with personal wounds, engage in meditation focused on healing. Allowing the number 33 to serve as a reminder that every scar carries wisdom, and every challenge holds the potential for growth. Lastly, if you notice this number appearing frequently in your life, trust that the universe is guiding you toward a path of love, service, and profound spiritual awakening. Number 44 is often referred to as the pillar of stability in Buddhist numerology. Unlike numbers that symbolize fleeting luck or momentary insight, 44 represents enduring success, unshakable foundations, and the rewards of disciplined effort. It is the number of patience, resilience, and the kind of wisdom that stands the test of time. In Buddhist philosophy, nothing truly meaningful can be built on shaky ground, whether it's a career, a relationship, or a spiritual practice. The essence of 44 lies in constructing something that will last for generations. A fascinating real-world example of this number's power can be seen in the construction of the Great Stupa of Sanchi, one of the oldest stone structures in India. Commissioned by Emperor Ashoka in the 3rd century BCE, this sacred monument was not merely a place of worship but a symbol of spiritual endurance. The architects of the stupa followed meticulous calculations to ensure its structural integrity, and its foundation, designed with remarkable precision, has withstood the test of time for over 2,000 years. The energy of number 44 is embedded in such creations. Whatever is built with patience, devotion, and strong intention will not only survive but thrive. Another example can be found in the life of Thich Nhat Hanh, the revered Vietnamese Zen master. When he founded Plum Village, his Buddhist community in France, he did not seek immediate expansion or quick success. Instead, he focused on creating a spiritual environment with a solid foundation of mindfulness, ethical living, and compassion. Decades later, Plum Village remains one of the most influential Buddhist centers in the world. This is the essence of 44, the wisdom to prioritize long-term growth over short-lived victories. In March 2025, the vibration of 44 will be particularly potent, urging those who encounter this number to focus on stability, discipline, and future security. If you are planning a significant investment, whether it's purchasing a home, launching a business, or committing to a new spiritual path, this is the time to ensure that your foundation is rock solid. Avoid impulsive decisions. Instead, think strategically and lay down roots that will support your growth for years to come. To harness the power of 44, engage in practices that cultivate long-term success. If you're in business, focus on strategies that promote steady, sustainable expansion rather than quick profits. If you are on a spiritual path, deepen your commitment through consistent meditation, not fleeting inspiration. And if you're building relationships, nurture them with patience, trust, and a sense of shared purpose. The presence of 44 in your life is a sign that you are being called to build something truly lasting, something that, like the great stupa of Sanchi, will stand as a testament to your wisdom and dedication for years to come. Number 55 is the catalyst for transformation, a force that breaks barriers and propels you into the unknown. Unlike numbers that signify stability in foundation, 55 thrives in movement, urging you to release attachments and embrace the winds of change. In Buddhist numerology, it represents impermanence, the ever-shifting nature of existence that the Buddha himself taught as one of the fundamental truths of life. Nothing remains the same, and those who resist change often suffer. However, those who align with the energy of 55 open themselves to new possibilities, personal reinvention, and profound spiritual breakthroughs. A striking historical example of this number's transformative energy can be seen in the life of Prince Siddhartha, the man who would later become the Buddha. At the age of 29, Siddhartha made a decision that mirrored the essence of 55. He abandoned his royal life of luxury and stepped into the unknown, seeking enlightenment beyond the walls of his palace. This radical transformation was not an easy path, but it was necessary. Without it, he would never have attained the wisdom that changed the world. The number 55 carries this same energy, the push to leave behind comfort and certainty to step into a greater destiny. Another example can be found in the spread of Buddhism itself. When Indian monks like Bodhidharma traveled to China in the 5th or 6th century, they did so without guarantees. Their journey was filled with uncertainty, but they trusted the path of transformation. Bodhidharma, in particular, is credited with founding Zen Buddhism, a school of thought that revolutionized spiritual practice in East Asia. His willingness to embrace change, rather than fear it, allowed Buddhism to evolve into new forms, reaching millions across different cultures. In March 2025, the presence of 55 will be a signal that transformation is not only coming, it is necessary. If you repeatedly see this number, it is an invitation from the universe to embrace change rather than resist it. Whether it's switching careers, moving to a new place, or adopting a new mindset, the moment is ripe for reinvention. Opportunities will arise, but they will require boldness. To harness the power of 55, practice letting go. In meditation, reflect on the attachments that hold you back, fear of failure, past regrets, or outdated beliefs, and consciously release them. Engage in new experiences, even if they seem intimidating. Travel to a place you've never been. Try a skill outside your expertise, or say yes to an unexpected opportunity. The more you step outside your comfort zone, the more aligned you will be with the transformative energy of 55. The greatest breakthroughs in life often come from the most unpredictable changes. Like the Buddha leaving his palace, or Bodhidharma crossing the seas, those who embrace 55's energy find themselves not lost, but awakened. Number 66 is a symbol of unconditional love, harmony, and deep emotional healing. Unlike numbers associated with material success or personal transformation, 66 resonates with the energy of compassion, unity, and the power of human connection. In Buddhist philosophy, love and harmony are not just emotions but powerful forces that shape our karma and influence our journey toward enlightenment. When the energy of 66 is embraced, it nurtures the soul, strengthens relationships, and creates an atmosphere of peace that extends beyond the self and into the world. Historically, the significance of love and harmony has been emphasized in Buddhism through figures like Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen master and peace activist. He dedicated his life to promoting mindfulness, compassion, and reconciliation, even in times of war and suffering. His teachings echo the essence of 66. True love and harmony require effort, understanding, and the willingness to heal past wounds. In the 1960s, during the Vietnam War, Thich Nhat Hanh advocated for nonviolence and compassion, showing that love is not a passive force but an active practice that has the power to transform even the most painful conflicts. His approach to peace and healing is a testament to the energy of 66, bridging divides and fostering deep emotional restoration. In Buddhist history, one of the most profound demonstrations of love and harmony was the story of Buddha's reunion with his family. After leaving his royal life behind in search of enlightenment, Siddhartha Gautama eventually returned to his homeland. Instead of resentment or anger from those he had left behind, his presence brought deep healing. His father, King Suddhodana, came to understand his son's spiritual path, his wife Yasodhara found peace, and even his son, Rahula, chose to follow the path of Dharma. This moment of reconciliation is a powerful example of 66's energy, the ability to restore bonds through wisdom, love, and deep understanding. If 66 frequently appears in your life, especially in March 2025, it is a call from the universe to focus on love in all its forms. This number encourages you to mend broken relationships, nurture your family connections, and create a harmonious environment where love can flourish. It is not just about romantic love, it extends to friendships, community, and even the love you have for yourself. To harness the power of 66, practice acts of kindness. Small gestures, such as expressing gratitude, offering forgiveness, or simply spending quality time with loved ones, can create ripples of harmony that extend far beyond what you can see. Engage in mindfulness practices that focus on loving kindness, such as metta meditation, where you send thoughts of goodwill and compassion to yourself and others. A peaceful home and heart are not accidental, they are cultivated. The energy of 66 reminds us that love is not just something we receive, it is something we give, nurture, and build. In September 2024, let this number guide you toward deeper connections, emotional healing, and a life filled with harmony. Number 77 is a gateway to profound spiritual awakening, a number that has been revered across cultures for its mystical significance. In Buddhism, it represents the deepening of wisdom, the refinement of intuition, and the alignment of one's soul with higher consciousness. Unlike numbers associated with material success, 77 calls upon individuals to seek truth beyond the physical world, to embark on an inner journey where enlightenment awaits. Throughout history, the power of 77 has manifested in remarkable ways. One of the most intriguing examples is the journey of the great Buddhist monk Xuanzang, who traveled over 77 regions across Asia in search of sacred scriptures. His legendary pilgrimage from China to India was not just a quest for knowledge but a testament to the transformative power of perseverance and spiritual devotion. Despite facing endless dangers, harsh deserts, treacherous mountains, and the threat of bandits, he remained guided by an unshakable faith, ultimately bringing back invaluable teachings that shaped the course of Buddhism in the East. The number 77 is also deeply connected to intuition and divine messages. In Buddhist texts, there are numerous accounts of monks receiving sudden insights or visions at the age of 77, as if the universe itself reveals hidden truths to those who have devoted their lives to spiritual growth. The famous Zen master Bankei, for instance, achieved a profound realization of the unborn nature of the mind, a concept central to Zen enlightenment, during an intense period of contemplation. His teachings emphasize that true wisdom does not come from external sources but from direct experience and inner stillness, a lesson encoded within the energy of 77. In March 2025, the vibrations of 77 will be particularly strong, making it an ideal time to seek deeper truths, refine spiritual practices, and unlock latent abilities. This is a period when meditation will yield unexpected breakthroughs, where synchronicities will guide those who are open to receiving divine wisdom. It is a reminder that spiritual growth often comes in waves. One moment, we may feel lost, and in the next, clarity floods in like a revelation. To activate the energy of 77 in your life, dedicate time to silent contemplation. Whether it is through meditation, prayer, or simply sitting in nature, allow space for insights to emerge naturally. Engage in spiritual study, ancient texts, Buddhist scriptures, or even wisdom passed down through generations all contain keys to higher understanding. Most importantly, trust your intuition. If 77 appears repeatedly in your life, it is not a coincidence, it is a direct message from the universe guiding you toward your highest path. In a world obsessed with external success, 77 reminds us that the greatest treasures lie within. The question is, are you ready to listen? Number 88 has long been regarded as a symbol of infinite abundance, a gateway to limitless prosperity. In Buddhism and many Eastern traditions, the number 8 represents balance, karma, and the cyclical nature of life. When doubled into 88, its energy is amplified, signifying not just material wealth but also spiritual richness, wisdom, and the ability to manifest one's highest potential. This number carries the essence of financial success, but unlike fleeting luck, it is rooted in deep karmic alignment, prosperity that is earned through past efforts, generosity, and wise decisions. One of the most fascinating historical connections to the power of 88 comes from the legendary Chinese Buddhist Emperor Wu of the Liang dynasty. Known for his immense devotion to Buddhism, he donated vast amounts of wealth to construct monasteries, spread Buddhist teachings, and provide for the poor. Despite giving away so much, his empire flourished economically, proving the karmic truth that generosity multiplies prosperity. Many ancient Buddhist scriptures echo this lesson. Wealth flows to those who understand its impermanence and use it as a tool for greater good. In modern times, the number 88 is deeply respected in Asian business culture, particularly in China, where it is associated with infinite success. It is no coincidence that major corporations, luxury brands, and high-profile entrepreneurs incorporate 88 in their financial strategies, product pricing, or even phone numbers. In Hong Kong, for example, an elite businessman once paid over $1.7 million just to secure a license plate with the number 88, such is the belief in its power to attract wealth and fortune. But what makes 88 more than just a number? It is a reminder that abundance is not merely about accumulating riches, it is about mastering the energy of wealth. Financial success follows those who think expansively, take bold actions, and align themselves with the right opportunities. In March 2025, the vibrations of 88 will be especially potent, making it the perfect time for career advancements, business ventures, and significant investments. Those who recognize this window of opportunity will find doors opening in unexpected ways. To harness the power of 88, start by visualizing abundance, not just in terms of money, but in all aspects of life. Write the number 88 on a piece of paper and place it in your wallet, bank account, ledger, or workspace as a subconscious reminder of your financial goals. When making important business decisions, consider dates that include 88 or times when its energy feels strongest. Above all, practice generosity. True prosperity is not just about receiving but also about giving freely, knowing that wealth flows in cycles. Number 88 is not just a number, it is an energetic key to unlocking boundless possibilities. The question is, are you ready to step into the flow of unlimited abundance? Number 99 is the pinnacle of spiritual evolution, a number that carries the weight of divine wisdom, universal compassion, and the call to higher service. In Buddhist philosophy, 9 is the number of completion, the final step before transcendence. When repeated as 99, its energy intensifies, signifying not only personal enlightenment but also the responsibility to uplift others. This number does not simply suggest spiritual growth, it demands action, urging those who encounter it to embrace their role as guides, teachers, and beacons of light in a world that desperately needs wisdom. History is filled with figures who embodied the power of 99, individuals who, upon reaching profound spiritual awareness, dedicated themselves to the service of humanity. One such example is the revered Indian Emperor Ashoka, who once ruled with relentless ambition and military conquest. However, after witnessing the immense suffering caused by his wars, he underwent a deep spiritual awakening. He renounced violence, embraced Buddhism, and spent the rest of his life spreading its teachings, building hospitals, and ensuring that his kingdom thrived under principles of compassion. His transformation mirrors the energy of 99, one that shifts from self-driven pursuits to a universal mission of enlightenment and service. In Buddhist traditions, monks often retire into deep meditation after years of teaching, signifying the completion of their worldly responsibilities. Many retreat into solitude at the age of 99, a sacred number symbolizing that their karmic cycle is nearing fulfillment. Similarly, great spiritual texts often contain wisdom that culminates in the number 99, signifying the ultimate revelation of truth before liberation. In modern times, if you repeatedly see 99 on license plates, receipts, clocks, or seemingly random places, it is not a coincidence. The universe is signaling that you are standing at the edge of a powerful transformation. It is a reminder that you have acquired enough wisdom and experience to impact the world in a meaningful way. This number calls you to step beyond personal desires and into a path of service, where fulfillment is no longer found in material gain but in guiding others toward enlightenment. To align yourself with the energy of 99, seek ways to serve selflessly. Volunteer your time, mentor someone in need, or share knowledge that could transform lives. If you feel lost, trust that your purpose is unfolding exactly as it should. Each experience you've had has prepared you for this moment. Meditate on the number 99, allowing its frequency to remind you of your higher calling. Most importantly, let go of any fear that holds you back from embracing this mission, for true fulfillment lies in lifting others as you rise. Number 99 is not just an ending, it is the gateway to something greater, the threshold of ultimate wisdom. The question is, are you ready to step into your higher purpose? Imagine stepping into March 2025 with a deep sense of alignment, knowing that the universe is working in your favor, that luck flows effortlessly into your life, and that every opportunity is magnetized toward you. No more resistance, no more setbacks, just a clear path toward prosperity, balance, and spiritual awakening. But remember, luck isn't just about numbers, it's about energy, intention, and action. Now is the time to harness the power of these numbers and align yourself with their vibrations. Start by incorporating them into your daily life. Use them in your passwords, write them in your journal, or even meditate on their meaning. Most importantly, clear away any negativity that blocks your flow of abundance. When your energy is open, luck finds its way to you effortlessly. What do you think about these numbers? Have you ever experienced a powerful synchronicity with them? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. We are building a mindful, awakened community, so like this video, subscribe to Zen Buddhism Wisdom, and join us on this journey towards spiritual prosperity. Your reality is shaped by the energy you cultivate. Let's align with abundance together.